Hello, and welcome to IRI Growth Insights C-Suite Conversations. I'm your host today, John McIndoe, Chief Marketing Officer here at IRI. As many of you know, IRI integrates big data, predictive analytics, and forward-looking insights to help CPG companies, retail, healthcare, and media organizations grow their businesses. We also share our thought leadership with the industry at large with the goal of addressing and tackling key challenges within our industry. Our special C-Suite Conversation series features notable leaders talking about the future of CPG, retail, and media. In this special episode, we'll be talking in detail about the media market, and we're honored to be joined here today by Michelle Hulst, Chief Operating Officer of the Trade Desk. I joked with Michelle that it was kind of odd that we were taping this virtually when theoretically we should all be at Cannes Lion drinking rosé on the Croisette, but that will be for next year. One of IRI's valuable industry partners is the Trade Desk. Trade Desk is a technology company that empowers buyers of advertising, enabling creation, management, and optimization of digital advertising campaigns across ad formats and devices. Michelle was promoted to the COO role in January of 2021 and is responsible for global operations, data, commercial enablement, and client services. Previously, Michelle was the Trade Desk's Executive Vice President of Global Data and Strategy. Michelle brings with her more than 20 years of leadership experience in advertising and data management. She's a personal friend of ours and a great partner. Our relationship with Michelle goes back to her days at Datalogix before it was purchased by Oracle. Talking with Michelle today is IRI's Executive Vice President of Omnichannel Media that sits within our Media Center of Excellence, Jennifer Pelino. Jennifer, Michelle, welcome. It's great to be with you today, albeit virtually. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, John, and welcome, Michelle. I know John mentioned in his introduction that we've known each other for many years. It actually goes back to when you were at Datalogix and I was at dunnhumby USA before the joint venture split to 8451, and we worked closely together to help media companies drive better optimization through use of data and connecting exposure information to offline sales. And so the landscape since then has changed because we were in the infancy of doing this, and it has continued to change and evolve from how we serve our customers to global reach, and of course the ecosystem, which has had many changes over the years and had considerable acceleration over the pandemic, as well as with some new changes in how data is being looked at across the board. So let's bring it forward a little bit and talk about what we've seen over the last 15 months or so and in other areas of our business. How do you think that we've really accelerated within this data-driven advertising world?
Sure. And just first of all, thanks for having me here. It is crazy when you think how far back we go. Although I feel like that was just John's, polite way of saying that we're old, talking about working together. But there has been a lot that's changed, and definitely the past, 12 to 15 months of the pandemic has been very challenging for marketers, but also has accelerated a lot of the changes that we've seen. And it just really, there were a lot of things at play. So we saw that the economy that was really a healthy economy when the pandemic hit just basically went on pause. And now as markets start to reopen, we see advertisers realizing that the way that they're going to drive business growth is to really double down on data-driven advertising. And so we saw companies kind of hit the pause button initially when everything hit, and then really started to look at, okay, now that things are starting to reopen, how do I get to reach the consumers that I really want to reach in the most effective way possible? And we also saw a lot of acceleration of consumer behavior also. The pandemic really accelerated consumer shift that we were seeing pre-pandemic, but of consumers moving from linear television viewing to CTV, which just helped with the whole data-driven advertising experience for advertisers, because they were really able to use all of those tools that they could use in other parts of digital and now apply them to a much different creative format that we see in TV. So that was really exciting. The other thing that we saw was advertisers with, kind of uncertainty around budgets and not really understanding where this was going. When were we going to be able to reemerge and reopen, which I think now the market has a lot more hope for and confidence that that's happening quickly, especially in this part of the world. But prior to that, there was also a lot of focus on how can I be as efficient as possible with my advertising. And so really wanting to make sure that every dollar that they were spending was generating a return. And so we saw marketers under pressure from their C-suite to make sure that they were squeezing the most out of every dollar that they spend, and then also that they could really prove the efficacy of their advertising. So we saw that happen a lot as well. And we saw, really an increase in the different types of partners that we work with and different types of data that was being demanded in the platform was really driving toward how can I prove ROI.
Yeah. And Michelle, when you talk about the different types of partners and the different types of data that clients were using to help make their media more efficient, we specifically work a lot with, the CPG industry and, retailers who support the consumer products. And as you know, there had been such elevated levels of sales within these products, people buying and trying new products that they haven't, assortments being adjusted to keep up with the supply chain. And a lot of this had, trickle down effects on what the brands were going to do from an advertising perspective, not only how much they were going to spend, but also too who they were going to target. Can you talk a little bit about, from the perspective of consumer products and from a distribution and side that you had seen what was going on?
Absolutely. So a couple things. One is with that change in consumer behavior, that what we saw, how we saw that materialize, especially in retail, for example, is during the pandemic, you saw shelves were bare when consumers are going to buy products that they were used to purchasing, right? I went in to buy, I'm a brand loyal customer on brand X. I go in to find it and it's not on the shelf anymore. What am I going to do? Okay, well, I don't have a lot of options. I'm going to try this brand. What it actually did was it had a lot of consumers trying new products. So fantastic. But as advertisers, you want to understand what's happening, where those consumer shifts occurring. And if you are a brand that's being tried now, you want to understand who's trying you, and how you can reach them to encourage them to come back and purchase again. They got a taste of your brand. Now you want to make them brand loyal. So we saw a lot of that happening. And then also just a scramble from advertisers to understand just those big shifts from a consumer behavior. How do, what are the trends that the pandemic kind of helped spur, but now are kind of carrying on from a consumer standpoint going forward. So we see even outside of like CPG, I'll just give an example, consumers changing to more digital forms of engaging with brands. And so then is that something that's that kind of was sparked by the pandemic, but then is a consumer trait that's here to stay?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say to some of the brands that we work with, I'm just like, my goodness, because I grew up in, brand management, and the biggest gift that you could ever get was something like this from an acquisition standpoint of the new consumers that you brought into your fold without having to fully pay, the $4, $5, $12 that normally it takes to acquire them through the use of advertising. So, yes, so a lot of changes there. while those changes were happening, there was also a ton of assessment in the marketplace about data due to increasing data regulations and information gathering and the origins of that. And we also too have this potential contraction of data based off of how platforms are looking to use data, and brands are really worried that they won't be able to connect with the right consumers. How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, we've been living and breathing this for the past year plus. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart. But really at the core, the value exchange of the open internet, which is, as a consumer, you get free content in return for getting relevant advertising served to you. That's not changing. What we are seeing is, as most are aware in this industry, is that there have been changes like announcements of third-party cookies going away, for example. And so marketers and advertisers are trying to understand, how is that going to impact how I advertise going forward? And I think part of the challenge is a couple things. One is it's important to remember that display advertising, which is really where cookies live and where data-driven advertising is reliant upon third-party cookies, is becoming a smaller and smaller part of the overall, advertising platform, connected advertising and data-driven advertising. But I also think that we as an industry, we haven't really done a good job of explaining that quid pro quo. And so what we really saw is that kind of lack of explanation, plus some of the breaches that we've seen in trust by, big walled garden tech companies. And then you see other big tech companies using those breaches as a way to really drive home kind of and instill fear from a consumer privacy data standpoint. So you see all that stuff that's been playing out over this past year. And it just really hasn't helped build trust in digital advertising among the consumer base. And so what we saw as all this was playing out was, first of all, a way to upgrade how digital data-driven advertising has occurred to date. And that has been based on a cookie, again, in display. And if we were to go back and redesign that today, it was happening way back when we were working together. But if we were go back to redesign that, we wouldn't have designed it based on a cookie, because there are just inherent flaws in that. And so at Trade Desk, we really looked at, how can we use this moment as a way to upgrade the overall experience for consumers, for publishers, and for advertisers? And so we really, with that, launched Unified ID 2.0, which is an industry-wide effort to be able to replace the way that data-driven advertising occurs today, which is cookie-based, based on consent-based IDs. And it's we're super excited about just the adoption across the industry. Again, we kind of launched this, but this isn't our product. It's open sourced. It's interoperable with other IDs, and it is meant to be something that is truly is kind of like a common currency across data-driven advertising that the whole industry can leverage. And so the amount of adoption that we've seen across key industry players, we just announced on the CTV side, Fox's Tubi TV this week. We have a whole host of publishers on board that are embracing this, including, Washington Post and others, as well as data partners and industry players as well. So it's been this collective effort by the whole industry. And one of the things that's been really exciting about it is it's a baseline that's kind of, again, like kind of common currency that everyone can align on. It's interoperable with other folks' IDs as well. And so advertisers can kind of work with whoever partners they're working with right now and the IDs that they're aligning on, and have confidence that those are going to be interoperable with UID2, so that they can work across all of the media types and have that connectivity, which is really key, especially when you're thinking about things like reach and frequency as an advertiser. Right. That's going to be really important.
Yeah, no, that's so important, because the confidence that it gives that you can be able to look at a universal approach to not only be able to connect and place your ads where you need to, but also to be able to understand as you said, the reach and the frequency across all of the different platforms with a universal approach in a protection, in a compliant and protective way for people to help ensure that concerns, if there are any from any organizations, can be protected. Right?
Exactly. And I think one other thing is that also, I see this narrative kind of playing out a little bit in the industry right now of, okay, great, those are consented IDs, UID2, other types of consented IDs, but that's only going to be, X percent. Like there's no way that it could cover all of the, users on the internet. And so we've seen that dialogue kind of playing out. And I think the industry is asking the wrong question there, because there will be consented IDs, but there are also going to be a whole host of other kind of identity solutions. And I think the question we should be asking as, people in the industry, whether it's publishers or advertisers, are really, and partners, frankly, are what's the confidence level that I'm reaching the actual person that I want to be reaching with my advertising? And that is where I see identity as a spectrum of levels of confidence, essentially. And so I think, these consent-based IDs that probably are going to have a very high level of confidence that you're reaching the correct person on the other side. And I think there will be other identity solutions that help fill in that picture where maybe the confidence levels, go down slightly. But overall, when we think about what we have today with the waterfall effect of cookies, all of the challenges that we have with cookie-based solutions, we are in such a better situation with the solutions that we're working on today. So I'm really excited about what that future holds from an identity standpoint.
Yes. And speaking of that, the ability to use that also too for people's first party data, right, which is really the ultimate option for any advertiser to use to make sure that you're really connecting to the right people, and being able to use that data also to enhance, right, with other data sets. And in the industry where we work currently today, there's many retailers in which we work with too that understand the value of their data. And so we've also seen this emergence of retail media platforms and the importance of shopper data for effective ad campaigns across formats and devices. I mean, especially in particular for CPG products, which tend to not have a lot of first party data. So how do you think as you're looking at, retail media and how it's operating today, and how brands and retailers can continue to connect and use these data sets to ensure that we can get the right information out to the right people and still in a compliant manner?
Yep. And I think, most retailers definitely recognize the value and the power of their shopper data. And we see, those retailers working with us and other companies like yourselves in order to make that data available so that their suppliers can reach their consumers and market more effectively to them in a secure, privacy-friendly way. So we're seeing that. We're seeing the value of, again, as you mentioned, first-party data and these identity solutions that unlock the ability for that data to be made available at very high fidelity without a lot of drop off or noise introduced into everything, which is really great. And we see purchase-based data as being so central to driving efficacy in ad campaigns. So CPGs and other advertisers really want to understand, did this advertising result in more sales? And that type of data can help them do so. Each retailer is probably going to have a slightly different approach, but there's just this common thread in these retailers that they really understand that the full value of their data is being able to provide that in the open internet to not have it locked up in different silos and things like that. We announced earlier this year a partnership that we have with Walmart to bring their data into the platform. We have a number of other retailers that we work with in order to do similar type things, as well as companies that work with multiple retailers in order to bring their data together. Again, it's an area where you're focused on, but other partners as well to bring all that in. And again, we've just seen the demand be so high from the CPG advertisers and other advertisers that don't have a huge amount of first-party data. And so they are looking for proxies for their first-party data that are really high quality and can help drive the insights that they're looking for.
Right. Yeah. And, we know this intimately well, right, on how important the purchase data information is. I mean, that's not going away regardless of a cookie or whatnot, of how they used to, how we're looking to identify. We have the ability to use that same connected data, understand how purchases can, be used to find the right people. And they are if you are a category buyer, we know it, and we can help get to the right individuals, no matter what other information that is used. That foundation of that purchase for a consumer product company is absolutely the most precious information that they can have. So it's really good to be partners, also too, partners with you in that regard of being able to help optimize that media and that exchange and that value exchange with the publishers, with consumers, with the advertisers. And we do that, right, with, as you had said, you can do that across all of these connected mediums now. It's not just, right, the digital ad. You mentioned it at the forefront when we looked at accelerated platforms during the pandemic, where we saw a real shift in the growth of streaming and connected TV advertising, where many people were only using linear TV before. Now they have this real opportunity to use the purchase information, to use that real knowledge about how people are purchasing their products into those platforms for better planning and targeting. How do you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on that side?
Yeah, sure. So, TV is typically one of the biggest segments in most marketers' campaign, and it has long been considered the best way to win the hearts and minds of consumers. And as I mentioned, we've seen this huge shift in consumer behavior during the pandemic. And we saw it before the pandemic, but we really saw it accelerate pretty significantly during the pandemic, where you saw folks, they were cord cutting before, but they started cord cutting in massive numbers during the pandemic. We also, I think all of us, started watching a lot more television than we did before. And we saw this explosion of streaming TV. So that was all happening. We saw on our platform, there was a tipping point that was basically hit this past year, which was the number of US CTV households exceeded 87 million, and our cable subscriptions were less than 80 million. So we saw that tipping point occur during the pandemic, which is, again, really putting CTV front and center. And what I love about that, as someone who's a data-driven marketer and focused on how data can help advertising, is that it allowed a lot of advertisers to start to really see the value of data-driven advertising across all types of mediums, not just display advertising or areas that they were comfortable with and that they really felt like, oh, okay, I know, this is where I focus on programmatic. It really helped expand that universe and bring the same tools that we see in programmatic to TV, which was really exciting. We also saw that it wasn't just like the millennials that are watching TV. So in eMarketer, I think they had a stat recently that it was like 77% of adults 45 to 54 have adopted CTV. So it's here. And the brands realize that if they're not advertising on CTV, that they're probably going to be, missing out on audiences. And we've seen, we did a study with iSpot, just looking at data across various campaigns. And what we found was that 67% of the households reached on CTV were unique. So as an advertiser, you can't just rely on linear anymore. You're going to miss out on all of these different audiences. So that was really exciting. And then all the things that come with that huge consumer shift to CTV, as I mentioned, unlock all of the tools that we've been able to see on other parts of digital in the past. So, you can apply data-driven advertising across TV at scale. You have flexibility in your TV advertising campaigns to allow for control on reach and frequency, which is really critical. And it's not just on the TV portion, but you can look at that across your entire media campaign, which is really exciting.
Right.
So those were some of the things that we saw. It's just, again, it's one of those silver linings coming out of a really difficult time for a lot of, folks in the industry of this shift that is driven in consumer behavior. And then once the consumers shift, the marketers follow. And so it's just forced folks to really get more comfortable and familiar with all of the tools that data-driven advertising unlocked.
Yeah. And Michelle, you had mentioned, which I think is absolutely critical, right? There has been always this challenge, and it's still a challenge. We're getting better, but this challenge of managing frequency across so many of the different platforms, right? You were unable to be able to do that with linear TV, but now the connected TV, you are able to do that across all of your digital type of assets, and the ability of which you can start optimizing in all of the different platforms to manage that is really important. And that brings us to another area, which is evolution, and another evolution in that speed of which data is coming in, so that now that marketers have that ability to really adapt on the fly and understand the purchases and the shopper reactions and quickly tie that to the advertising and the business results and make sure that they can make those changes. What do you think about that today from a speed standpoint, and how fast do you think we're going to be able to do that? Because there's still some limitations on the fact that, a number of people always take a look at the plans to make the optimization. So where do you think we're going, and how fast do you think we're going to get there?
Yeah, I think there's a desire by the advertisers. We hear it's a lot from the CPGs to get the data closer and closer and closer to where the decisions are being made. And what we see in the data is that the closer you get the data to where the decisions are being made, meaning which ad am I going to serve, who am I serving it to, the more effective the advertising is. And so as an industry, the more we can focus on that, getting the right data, again, purchase-based data is like the holy grail there for a lot of advertisers, and being able to get that into platforms where you can make quick decisions and determine who you're reaching from an audience standpoint is really, really critical. We definitely see a lot of demand for that amongst our advertisers. I think some of the stuff that I talked about, where we're starting to see acceleration in retail partners and making their data available to advertisers for that reason, for that use case, is really critical. And again, such a key component of that is, as you mentioned, the ability to then get feedback and results using that data and using that to optimize and pivot if needed, and make those changes that are needed to make sure that you're driving effectiveness as much as possible. And so there is no shortage of desire, I think, from the market to shorten that time frame, accelerate the speed as much as possible. And that is definitely something that at the trade desk that we're working on as a company, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So if you had a few things to say for brands for consideration now in the environment that we're in, what are the most important, top 3 or 4 points for a brand to consider now as they're looking in how they're working within the ecosystem today?
Yeah. Well, as it's abundantly clear in this discussion, I think data-driven advertising is absolutely key and critical. If you're not using data, then that's a challenge for sure. I think, as we all know, that we have cookies that that are going to be going away at some point in the future. And frankly, regardless, I think we should, as advertisers should be testing identity solutions and do it now. I don't think we should be waiting until, I use this analogy sometimes is what we experienced with GDPR in Europe is like, I think we all just kind of thought, yeah, it's coming, but do we really have to deal with this? And then it came and everybody tried to scramble to deal with it. I really hope as an industry, and I don't think that's happening from what we've seen, but I hope people don't put off testing. There's so much upside that we've seen advertisers that start converting their first party data into, in our case, into UID2s, and then starting to transact on those throughout the ecosystem, that they're getting a lot of benefit. So I encourage advertisers to do that. Along those lines, if you have first party data, encouraging you to continue to focus on capturing that and also converting those and starting to transact on it. If you don't have first party data or it's limited, is working with folks that have, again, proxy first party data that can be used, that you can leverage. So in the case of a CPG, working with retail data, for example, in order to help your data-driven advertising. And then I can't emphasize enough CTV that we were just spent a bunch of time talking about, but really making sure that that's incorporated in pretty robustly into your planning and into your campaigns and your media spend, because I think you're really missing out on core consumers if you don't have that. And again, you can apply all of these great tools, whether it's related to reaching the right audiences or measuring the effectiveness of your advertising across that medium, as well as all the others. So you get a really good picture of how your whole campaign is working.
Exactly. And keep advertising, right? Keep advertising, because advertising is good.
Yeah. And
when done well, yes.
Yeah. And you think about that, right? Again, when we go back to the pandemic, because it's so top of mind right now, because we're just kind of, in this weird transition phase now where we feel like we're, starting to emerge. Although, as John said, we're not in Cannes having rosé. So until that happens, we haven't really emerged, right? But if you think about what's happening there, is consumers now are making decisions. They weren't spending necessarily, and now they're spending. When you think about travel, for example, the route to Hawaii is insane, especially from the US, because that's where travelers are coming from. It's domestic right now. When I say US, I mean mainland US,
right,
to the islands. And so what you're seeing is you have consumers that are making decisions of which airline am I going to go with. You better believe that advertising is helping drive those decisions. It's the same thing that we were talking about on decisioning on products, where they might have been trialing new products in store from a CPG standpoint, and now they're trying to decide what do I buy next, and advertising's factoring into all of that right now. So definitely to marketers, it's important to double down on advertising and making sure when you are that you're spending on the stuff that's actually effective. That's going to be really key.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you, Michelle. We wanted to wrap up. You know what we wanted to wrap up though with? Some fun little facts, because it's been such a great conversation, and close with a lightning round. And here's some of the things. I'm going to ask you about 4 or 5 questions, and what's coming to the top of your mind. So what's your favorite podcast?
Okay, so this probably won't win for the, I don't know, like I have things that I listen to that are informative, like news podcasts and things like that. But one podcast that I really love right now is Smartless. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. So it's Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and Sean Hayes, and they just invite a guest every week and talk to them. And most of the guests are their friends, but they also have people, that really know what they're talking about, like, astronauts and things like that they talk to, and just have a conversation. And what I love about that is they're just really funny. And so, especially again, coming out of this weird, pandemic time, just nice to get a good laugh in. But I was also a huge fan of Arrested Development. I don't know others out there that watch that. If not, you can stream it back to our conversation on, CTV. But it's just like the rapport between all of them is just really great too. So it's just
I'm going to have to listen. I haven't listened to that one. So favorite or best or pandemic behavior, not favorite, I guess, pandemic behavior that you're going to stick with, and then the one that you can't wait to get rid of.
Okay. So the one that I'll stick with, for those of you that know me, is I'm a huge walker and hiker. I love to walk. And I did this before the pandemic, but I often take walk and talks with my team if I have a one-on-one. When it was pre-pandemic, I would be forcing them to go walk around the city with me. Some of them appreciate it. I think some of them were like, could you have warned me? I could have changed into some, sweat clothes or something, or, workout clothes. But that is definitely something that during the pandemic, it was just a way to get, away from Zoom for a little while. And I feel like it gets you more engaged with somebody one-on-one when you're listening to them and you can kind of ideate and everything. So I'm going to keep doing that post-pandemic. For one that I want to get rid of, I would say, so I'm a mom of 3 boys, and our kids were all in remote school, which is just, I give so much gratitude to their teachers, and I am so impressed with what they did, this past year and a half, especially with what they were dealing with. I don't know how they did it or got through it. But it also made me so grateful for in-person education and understanding just how important that is for the minds of our children, and for them to have that social engagement and just be in a classroom, I think is really important. So I'm really looking forward to getting my kids back.
So you're looking forward to stopping to be, I can empathize, stopping to be a teacher and a COO. So
yeah, exactly.
I can understand 2 jobs.
Yeah, that's challenging too, for sure.
Exactly. Okay. And last one, really quick. What is your favorite destination? And where would you like to go to be traveling?
Okay. Yeah. So this one's probably pretty generic too, but just again, 3 kids, all span of ages, multiple palettes and everything. Italy is a favorite across the board of our family. My husband and I love it. My kids love it. We've been all over the country. And so that's just a lovely place to go. And, looking forward to getting back there. And then I would say definitely looking forward to getting to some of the places that have been on our list that, we've been on pause for the past year and a half. So just really looking forward to getting back out there and traveling around the world.
Well, that's good. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person very soon, and having our real can rosé, wherever that shall be, but it will be very nice. And I really thank you for the fantastic conversation. So thank you, Michelle, and look forward to continuing our amazing partnership between IRI and Trade Desk, and helping our advertising partners improve all of their media and marketing spend.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle and Jennifer. An incredible conversation, truly fascinating to really learn how fast this market is changing, and how CPG advertisers can and should be continuing to build meaningful and beneficial relationships with their consumers using a variety of new approaches to data-driven advertising. So many takeaways that our listeners will get from this, but I thought I'd recap a few of the big things that I heard. Obviously, we talked about the dramatic changes in data-driven advertising, and how the advertising landscape is continuing to evolve at rapid pace. The shifts in economy and the pandemic behaviors, the doubling down of data-driven advertising after a brief pause, the acceleration of consumer behaviors, combined with significant move from linear TV to connected TV content viewing. Certainly the need for greater advertising efficiencies and increased focus on ROI from the boardroom all the way down, and really ensuring that every dollar moves the needle from a sales and engagement and customer experience perspective. You guys also talked about new buying, brand switching, and trialing, and those trends that started in the pandemic, how they helped spur some really fundamental shifts in what was happening at the shelf and on online, and how some of those are lasting and some of those are fading, and how do you get a good read on that? You talked about changes in privacy regulations, emerging industry standards for the cookieless world, a lot of work that the trade desk is doing, evolving consumer demand, and ongoing efforts to really increase trust in the digital advertising space. You also touched on the emergence of retail media platforms, high quality first party data, purchase-based data, and loyalty data, and the vast array of both existing as well as emerging data assets, and the opportunity to leverage these assets in really truly a new and integrated fashion, and that the power of that really unlocks for advertisers, what that unlocks for advertisers to truly connect with consumers at the right time in a compliant and consumer-friendly manner. You also spoke about optimization and the need for real-time feedback on campaign effectiveness, and the new and emerging ability to optimize and course correct in a far accelerated fashion mid-campaign, not looking in the rear view mirror of what happened, but actually in real time while you're still on that journey and course correcting to make sure that your campaign really paid off. A couple of big takeaways that we closed off on in terms of things that brands must consider moving forward. First and foremost, the power of data-driven advertising. It's here to stay, embrace it. Testing identity solutions now, don't wait. They're emerging. We need to get out and test and learn. If you've got first-party data, use it. If not, work with partners who do to test and learn and get proficient before this becomes, the true way of how we're operating and how we are executing our media activation programs. Leveraging retail media platforms now, again, to test and learn. Keep advertising. Michelle, you made an excellent point. Consumers are making decisions and spending now. So now is the time to really leverage advertising to capture hearts, minds, and share. So really an illuminating conversation. Thank you so much. For our listeners and viewers, this recorded conversation will be available at our website, iriworldwide.com. We hope you'll take the opportunity to review our other thought leadership, including valuable reports, and of course, our dashboard of economic indicators. So with that, I will bid you all adieu. Have a great rest of the week. Be safe and take care. Thanks for joining us.